Hey, everybody.
Thanks for tuning in to the Hanging On to Hope podcast.
I'm Brenda J.
And I'm Karen Wonder.
And we are HangingOnToHope.org.
This podcast is intended as educational and is not psychological or medical advice. Always consult a professional when needed, and we disclaim any liability in connection with the instruction, information, or advice given.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to the Hanging On to Hope podcast. This is Brenda J. After we finished episode 100, we wanted to make sure that the guests that we had on episode 100 were able to vocalize what they had to say about their favorite podcasts and just let them express themselves without us taking up too much of that podcast. So this is a continuation of episode 100. Karen and I just had so much more to say about so many different podcasts, and we just hope you really enjoy this episode. So continuing with part 2 of episode 100. Here we go. So my favorite, I feel like the most impactful thing to me in editing all of them was the trailer that I did with Bob Hamp. If any of our listeners want to listen to it, the trailers are just 1-minute gold nuggets that I have sat and spent the extra time pulling what God shows me. And they're 1 minute long for all those abuse victims that can't think clearly or listen to a full podcast.
Bob Hamp holds a special place in my heart because when I first came across his video on the dynamics of abuse that was on Facebook, I sat and watched that and listened to it, and I just bawled because I'd never heard someone explain the dynamics of, basically he summed up my 22-year marriage in 30, 40 minutes. It was so right on, and the way he explained it. And so to have him on, that was such a blessing.
Yeah, I listened to him the other day, the whole podcast again, and it's just so amazing how he explains it
so well. He's very good at explaining it. And I still follow him on Facebook. He still inspires me what he shares on Facebook. He's just a very wise man.
Yeah, definitely.
And his wife too, because she's a counselor.
Agreed.
So, yeah, I love the trailers because I think, like you said, it gives people a summary and hopefully makes people go, wow, I want to learn more about this. That Bob Hamp trailer, I can listen to that. After that came out, I would just listen to that over and over and over again because what he says in that is so powerful.
I still listen to it too.
Yeah, it's just empowering because you're like, yeah, it's not that there was something wrong with us, because I think shame is always attached to any kind of abuse. Yeah. You always think, there must be something wrong with me. I deserve this or whatever. And so he kind of emphasizes, no, it's that there's something right with you.
Yeah.
I can't hear that enough.
Yeah, it is amazing. I was playing some of them today, and I'm like, the one on boundaries is amazing. He says the most loving thing with Patrick Doyle says the most loving thing you can do is set boundaries.
Yeah. I wrote something about him too, because he's another one that holds a special place in my heart, because I would watch his YouTube videos, which when he was on our podcast, he was sharing that he was in an abusive marriage when he was doing those episodes. So that just kind of blew my mind. But yeah, that one.
Andy was a pastor, right?
Yeah.
That was in an abusive marriage as a pastor.
Right. As a pastor. Yeah. And then he
could so relate to that when we did that podcast.
Yeah. That one was so excellent. And that podcast I've listened to so many times too, because it's not just in your marriage or in a intimate relationship, but friendships, coworkers, anyone that you need to set boundaries with. That's such a good episode to listen to.
Absolutely.
I listen to it over and over because it's helped me, because I struggle with boundaries. So I love that one. And that holds a special place in my heart too.
Yeah, it's amazing. The one on with Ann Blythe, just that we're putting up walls to protect ourselves from bad people, and manipulators try to tell you need to let your walls down. But no, you're actually keeping your walls up to protect yourself to keep the bad people out, because we're not keeping our walls up with our family, just with people we don't know.
Yeah, I love that one too, because that's powerful what she said there. Because, we don't need boundaries with safe people, with healthy people.
Right.
We need boundaries with people that are not healthy, because people that are not healthy don't want boundaries.
Right.
So
right, because manipulators and abusers don't even know boundaries or what they are.
Yeah,
absolutely.
They're threatened by them.
Yes.
They're like, well, they see it as a bad thing, but that should be a red flag. If someone's not feeling good about, wait, I don't like these boundaries. That should be a red flag right away.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree.
So I thought that really stood out to me. And then Andrew Bauman, one of the quotes from his podcast, to honor God is to honor each other. Every size, every shape. We kind of all talked about this. We are all image bearers of God. We honor God by how we love each other. That was in episode 1, but we also interviewed him again. And then Steve Tracy said abuse is absolutely one of Satan's most fierce tools to destroy, but Satan doesn't have to have the last word. All forms of abuse hold power over who we are as image bearers. Abuse attacks the essence, and abuse creates soul wounds, like we were talking about. And then the Grigors, that's my favorite subject, hope and sex.
Yeah, Karen loves to talk about sex.
Well, I mean, I just think that sex gets talked about wrong. Again, like all the books I read, marriage books.
Yeah.
We're emphasizing the man's needs, and it's very manipulative.
Yeah.
So I love how she brings out, let's read the whole Bible and let's talk about what the Bible really does say about it. And one thing that stood out to me about her podcast is she said, Jesus never refused to look at a woman. What Jesus did was truly see women. So Jesus was very revolutionary with women. I also had a quote from Eric Winfield. He was great. He said that he had to do self-inventory, that he was at one of the lowest points in his life. He was having a pity party. He was sharing about that he had a praying mother that told him that he was enough and that you have to believe that God will bring you through this, that it was a process. And to see him continue to have podcasts and continue to use what he's been through to help other people, it's just very encouraging.
And Eric, I know you're listening to this one. We love you. I mean,
we do. I love what he posts. I love what he's doing. He's talking about pornography.
Yeah, we were just
amazed. I so
amazed.
appreciate as a male talking about pornography.
Oh, absolutely.
That's great. I love what he's doing.
Like a man of God that is just out there, helped me even when he was at work when I needed help with someone that was on drugs. Like amazing. Thank you so much, Eric.
We appreciate you so much.
Thank you for what you do and what you are doing and just the reach that you're having, the impact that you're having on the world.
Yeah, and just reading his book was so positive, just so full of scripture.
Yeah, amazing.
Yeah. But Celesta Tracy was also very special to me because I went to her as a counselor years and years ago. So to have her on recently was very, very special to me.
Yeah. I mean, I absolutely love Celesta Tracy as well. Like, wow. And going through Mending the Soul. And hopefully we will be able to, or you will be able to facilitate a group. I'll be in it.
You can always facilitate it too.
Not yet. I'm going to be in another one. Anyway.
Now I love her and having her on because I got to see her face because she wanted to see, and it brought me back to when I went to her as a counselor, and she's just so full of wisdom and so full of grace. And
yeah, she is.
I'm just like, I can listen to you all day.
She prayed for us and it was just, wow.
No. And I'm glad I told you to send me the prayer because it was so powerful. Like if I ever have a down day, I just need to listen to her prayer for us. It was
and when she said
inspiring.
to me, Brenda, the fact that you're recognizing that you need to have more emotion is growth.
Yeah.
I was like, wow.
She had a lot of
wise.
Great gold. Yeah, she is. She's very
so wise.
They're in Africa. They're in one of the places. I mean, they go to Africa which is a place so full of oppression. I mean, we don't even realize in the United States what they have to deal with in Africa.
Yeah.
Like that's I just can't even imagine, but that's what I respect about them is they're also reaching out to other parts of the world and they're being used.
Yeah. It is amazing.
People that are suffering.
Just amazing people.
Yeah.
And also Leslie Vernick, because her book was very validating. It's one of the first books I read that started connecting the dots. So to be able to interview her, I just get so excited when I get, responses back to people like, yeah, we'll be on your podcast. I do a little happy dance every time someone responds. And then Nagme Panahish, her quote was, she said, Jesus came to save a person, not an institution. And we get so caught up in the institution that we become like the Pharisees. That God created marriage to protect. It's supposed to be a covering. We are loved and protected and nourished and not hurt and destroyed. So, and we used to pray for her years ago and when everything that was going on with her and Saeed. So it was very special to be able to interview her. So it's just been a blessing to be a part of this podcast.
So some of my favorite podcasts were, of course, I think this one is critical. Danielle's on financial abuse because it's so important for people to understand that that's abuse. And a lot of people don't even know that that's abuse at all until they listen to that podcast.
I mean, that was really good too, because I didn't really realize until we went through that whole podcast that was an issue that we had too.
Yeah.
So I think that a lot of people may not realize that one because when you're married, you don't maybe think about that. So I think that was very, very, very valuable information that Danielle went over.
Amazing. And I think the percentage was 90% of people that are in any type of abusive marriage are also being financially abused.
Yeah.
So that is a must listen if you are being abused in any way.
Right. You may not think that, that's not an issue for me. But if you listen, you might go, wow, maybe it is an issue.
Absolutely. That one I thought was crucial. The other one is Nicole's. I feel like number 12 is important because a lot of people don't know that's abuse when you're neglected. And that's also a form of abuse. People don't know how painful that is. Neglect.
Right. Neglect. And Celesta had said when they're redoing the Mending the Soul book and then they're going to cover that a lot more. Yeah. That's definitely an issue. It's not something you hear people talk about a lot.
No.
Yeah, especially if you're in a Christian marriage, there shouldn't be neglect.
No.
That shouldn't be an issue. So yeah, I thought her story, I could definitely relate to her story.
Yeah, and Nicole, and it was big in the church. They were big part of the church. So
yeah.
And just the pain that she said that you feel.
Yes.
Never would even, I guess I was neglected in a way, but I mean, I guess I was neglected too.
Oh, you were neglected for sure.
Yeah. Yeah. I just let him do whatever he wanted. I just don't want him to get beat up. So. Another one for me that's really was an important one was number 6, abuse in the church. Thomas Pride goes in and trains churches on how to handle abuse in the church and recognize it. Now, I have a lot to add with Thomas Pride. I just listened to his again, and I got the correct quote for this. So, if there's any threat whatsoever in the relationship, ever, it is a full stop, forever gone. The moment there is a threat stated or implied, then all bets are off. Everything goes to zero and we are done. The moment he touched me physically, that was a serious threat. And it was before that as well. But if they touch you physically, it's a serious threat. The relationship is done. And that was so helpful to me to hear that because I just wish I would have known that before. I was talking to a lady at the shelters yesterday and she said she wished she would have known that these resources were out there. She didn't know any of this stuff really existed. Yeah. And I said, that's exactly why we're doing this podcast.
Right. Yeah. Because you have to feel safe. If you don't feel safe in a marriage, in an intimate relationship, then you can't continue with that.
Yeah, that was a big wake-up call for me when we did that one with Thomas Pride at the beginning, and my brain wasn't working. And then I remember him saying it takes 6 months to get out of the brain fog, and I'm like, it took me about 2 years.
That's approximate.
I'm like, I should have went to his acceleration program.
No, I loved his.
Yeah. And
this was very powerful.
He also says, this is a huge one. He says, I can't change them. I can't change anybody. I'm not responsible for it. The only thing I can do is tell the truth to myself about my situation. I can only decide when the relationship is done. The only decision you get to make is when the relationship is done. You can't change anyone. And that was super powerful. And then he also says the last thing I have, what he has to say, he says, there's freedom in truth. Truth is imperative. Pastors have to make it easy for you for the truth to be told.
Right.
And that's the part of the struggle in the church is they're not making it easy for victims to tell the truth, and they need to make it easy for them.
Right. And I just listened to Scott McKnight's one again. I hadn't listened to that for a while. And one thing he said was that pastors that cover up truth, I mean, Jesus never covered up truth. And a lot of pastors today, I mean, I'm not speaking to all pastors, obviously, but there's this sense of they have this platform and they're focused on their platform and protecting themselves.
Right.
Instead of protecting. And that to me is a number one sign of a red flag church that I will not be a part of. If they're covering up abuse. And that's why Scott McKnight's, to me, his podcast was so powerful because he brought that out. Like Jesus would never cover up sin.
Yeah, no.
And if there's abuse going on and a church is covering that up, I will not be a part of that church.
And that brings me back to Diane Lambert's.
Yes. And I loved her
where she talks about that. So they all kind of go together with the spiritual abuse.
Yeah. We had Scott McKnight and his daughter, Laura Behringer, on, and he said, and this isn't an exact quote because I kept stopping it and trying to get the exact quote, but basically he was saying, we have to recognize the complexity of the pastoral calling is going to attract people that like grandiosity, and that type of people is the opposite of what Jesus calls leaders and teachers to be and do. That Jesus wasn't about grandiosity, right?
Right.
He was humble. He didn't draw attention to himself.
No,
in fact, most of the time he'd say, don't tell anyone.
Right.
So, and
Absolutely.
I know I'm not saying all pastors are like that because obviously they're not, but that's where you have to be careful because pastors some can have that tendency. And I think pastors that are covering up abuse and doing things like that, that's where they're more worried about their image than about the victim and about people that are being hurt by a perpetrator in the church. That needs to be addressed more than covering it up.
Yeah.
So that's why I thought that was a really powerful quote from him.
Andrew Bauman's pornography, that is very critical. That is a form of abuse. And I send it to to most men, which I mentioned earlier, How Not to Be an Ass, 24 minutes of, it's so educational for the women and the men. Then also Lori Jones's EMDR, very important because your brain heals from trauma without having to try so hard, because we do everything that we can to heal. But some of that trauma, like when I did EMDR, I didn't know what was going on, but like Lori explains in that what's happening and why it works fast. So I love that one.
I mean, I just thought that was educational. I haven't done a lot of EMDR, but I thought it was good that she explained it more in depth to people to understand it.
Yeah, that's a very popular one.
Yeah. I have a quote from F. Remy Diedrich, which we had on us. He talked about exchanging our faulty view of God for the truth, because he talked a lot about spiritual abuse too.
Yeah.
And trauma and just that simple
His
thing.
His whole thing was on spiritual abuse, wasn't it? Yeah.
It was.
People love that one. That was a very popular one.
That was an excellent one. It was excellent. So I love that quote.
Absolutely.
Because we all do have faulty views of God, because if you have an experience where you felt manipulation from scripture, then you're going to have a faulty view of God.
Absolutely. So
it's so important to examine that and say, but that's not Jesus. That's not God. That's somebody else that's trying to be controlling, but God is not controlling.
Yeah. I do love all the real people, real voices, and listening to real stories, and they're all so different. And the one with Haley on online relationships, that one really need to listen to if you're getting out of an abusive relationship and you're online talking to people. That is critical to listen to that one.
I mean, that was great because I've had a little bit of experience with that.
Yeah.
I don't know how much I shared.
And a lot of my friends have.
Yeah.
It's not just
it's
you.
very, very common these days with so many people are doing dating apps. Dating apps is probably the most common way that people are dating these days. So.
Well, think about it too. Like they didn't feel safe, so they might feel safe online.
Yeah. It's very easy to disguise who you are if you're doing online dating.
Absolutely.
And especially if you haven't met in person and you're just texting and, even doing FaceTime or whatever, you're still not meeting that person and seeing their character. No. So it's very important to make sure you see a person's character before you make any major decisions.
I don't accept any friend requests or anything if I don't know the person.
I don't either.
And then anytime I ever have, I'll realize you can tell they're not from the United States. And then they say they are, or, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
Because you'll see their sentences are they're translating or something.
Mm.
So, and then my friends have had ask them to buy them some type of card of some sort. And
right.
Yeah.
That
it's
experience
you don't even know if that's that real person.
Right.
But 30 years ago, I was at a job when all the internet started and everything. And I had these girls that were talking to guys out of state, and they were sending pictures of themselves and it wasn't them. Mm. Like someone that wasn't even them. And I was like, that's when I realized that people weren't sending even back then.
Yeah. I mean, I've seen it because I'm on a lot of dating apps right now. Yeah. And I remember one time there was a guy that I was kind of interested in, but then I remember seeing him on another dating app and he had a different name.
Oh.
So then I'm like, it made me so mad. Yeah. I'm like, that's just wrong. Who's doing this?
Oh, man.
Yeah. It's messing with
your mind. My goodness.
Yeah.
And it's so I'm just so careful. And I just hope everyone else is too out there that's listening.
Yeah, you have to be very careful.
Yeah.
Make sure you meet them in person and get to know them. Like they were talking about on the betrayal trauma one, you have to know them for a period of time to see is what they're saying matching their actions?
Absolutely.
Because if it's not, stop.
Yeah, 100%. And then Brian's was really good. And Danielle, all the people that spoke on there and were brave enough to speak, wonderful. Sarah McDougall, hers was one of the earlier podcasts, I think it's number 5. She talks about the 4 seasons of healing. Safety, security, strength, and I think shares the 4th one. That's very important to listen to when you're getting out of an abusive relationship. But that is critical because I think that's the only podcast we've had that talks about the 4 seasons of healing.
Yeah, hers was very educational.
Yeah.
It really helped me, even having years of healing when she talked about the different stages. I thought that was very, very important. She covered it very well.
Karen and I have been doing advocacy quite a bit this year with Winged Hope, and I started doing some as well. And the listeners start listening to the podcast. And there's just some critical ones to listen to, and Sarah McDougall's would be one of those.
Oh, yeah.
Absolutely. The Dynamics of Abuse with Bob Hamp.
Yeah.
If any of our listeners are just getting out and really need some education.
Yeah, those are 2 really
and
good
not to
ones.
repeat past patterns. A few other ones that are really good. I love Lundy Bancroft's trailer. Yeah, the abusers turning kids against their mothers. That's what Lundy Bancroft said. Oh, yeah, and we just met someone that was having trouble in the court systems. She's like, yeah, I'm definitely going to listen to Lundy Bancroft, so.
Yeah, his is powerful because he knows what he said about the court system. Thankfully, I didn't have to experience what a lot of women have had to experience where they're, I mean, I know, a gal that's in our online support group that's been battling for 7-8 years.
Yeah.
Her ex, and he's just trying to drain her dry of finances, and he keeps winning things, and it makes me so mad when we'll be praying, and it's crazy. But when you listen to his, you understand because he talks about follow the money trail.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, it's a very unethical situation where people are profiting off of divorce and abuse.
It's horrible.
It's very unethical, and I don't know how people can live with themselves if they're helping in that situation.
It is. It's so bad.
It's bad.
Ken McFerrin, number 68. You train people how to treat you by setting boundaries. And if people are mistreating you, you need to reevaluate your boundaries. And that one you need to listen to because you got to take notes on that one. It's incredible.
Yeah, I wrote something down about him too because he was my boss for 2 months. I mean, and getting to know him, and because I think I asked him about his tattoo. He was such a witness to me of a hard worker. Yeah. And then getting to know his story, it just made so much sense because he was such a great boss in the sense that he really tried to have good communication with his employees. And I mean, listening to his podcast, I just so am inspired by, he went through such a painful childhood.
Yeah. I was shocked at his story.
Yeah. His story is shocking.
I
but
was
yet
shocked.
He's an example of how you can hang on to hope and how he's become a better person.
Yes.
And he's writing a book on being a manager and being able to, because to me, he was one of the best managers I've ever worked for. And I think it's because he's able to have that compassion because he was talking about, growing up in that he was always having to feel out the situation. And he's been able to use that, which could be seen as a negative, but he's using that now as a strength.
Yes, absolutely.
And that was so inspiring because to me, that's all what we want to do, right? Is use everything you've been through in a positive way.
Yeah.
And to me, he's a good example of that.
You train people how to treat you. I mean, my goodness.
Yeah.
You do with those boundaries. You do.
Right.
You do. And his story was just like this example of, it wasn't only that he was abused in every way and his family was abused in every way, but also they were all these other religions. They would move around to become different religions, and he still came back to Christ.
Right.
So not only did he suffer through abuse and become a better person through it, he also knew the truth.
Right. He went back to the truth of what is God and God is not, all these other things.
Yeah. Because that was the first story we had where someone moved around like that and their dad was a, quote, pastor that just moved as soon as people caught on to him.
I know.
Yeah.
That one was like not even just changing denominations, but like changing, like religions like Mormonism and Christianity. And
that was a great story and how he turned out.
Yeah. He's an inspiration. I just saw him not that long ago because I had to go get my card.
I saw him too.
Yeah. And to see that he's continuing to thrive in his career and continue to want to have that inner growth.
Yeah.
Like that's very inspiring to see.
Definitely.
He's an inspiration.
And then I love number 80 on attachment theory with Jenny Larson. That's very incredible. She's so great on that one, explaining it.
I mean, I love Jenny because I've been seeing her again. I hadn't seen her for
love
a
Jenny
long
too.
time, but it's
Jenny saved me.
Yeah, I'm going
Saved
through
my life.
a season this year of just having a difficult job and just adjusting to a lot of different things. So I'm like, I think I need to go back to counseling. And so I've been going back, seeing her again, and she's great. And she did a great job on that podcast because I've always been interested in attachment theory, and she really breaks it down so well.
She does.
If you don't understand it, just listen to the podcast because she breaks it down in a simple way that helps you understand a lot of your upbringing. There's connections there. It just helps you understand why you may react the way you do and why you have maybe some issues in relationships. If you can break it down and understand that connection, it's not a hopeless, that's what I loved about it. Yeah. It's not like, well, you're just insecure attachment and there's nothing you can do. No, there's things you can do to have.
And we also talk about the secure attachment and what it is so that people understand. And that's what's so great about the podcast.
Right.
Is we do take a lot of time writing those and researching.
Right. We do. It's all to help our listeners because we've been there, done that.
Exactly. And I love the dating podcast. What I like about that one with Michelle Donnelly is how she explains how trustworthiness is gained. Someone is trustworthy when what they say and what they do matches over a long period of time. They need to prove to you with their actions, not just by what they say, that they're trustworthy. And that was huge for me because I was very naive. I just took everything for what they said. Never looked at what they did was never matching. So that for me was life-changing. So yeah, you talked about, that was one of your favorites too.
Yeah.
And Nicole talked about it because she got triggered through the dating. When you start dating, you find out, oh, this is a trigger for me. But what was your opinion on that one a little bit more?
Oh man, I love that. And I think one of the things that stood out to me that she said is she can tell by where she's at in her dating life, like where she's at emotionally or on her healing journey, because you do get triggered.
Yeah.
And so it kind of shows you like, oh, there's some areas I need to work on still. And I'm dating again now. So it's like, it's been a good review of like just really paying attention to what's important. And
I'm still a mess, peeps. Not going to lie. Can't even get that far yet, but that's okay because I'm happy.
Yeah, that's
the
all
joy
that
in the
matters.
Lord is really more important than
I think
any
it's
of that.
so much more. I would always give the advice if somebody it's better to wait to date than to date too early. I mean, I think it's good to work on yourself. Like, I have no regrets that I didn't date for like 7 years. I mean, It took me 7 years after my divorce. I knew I had to heal.
Yeah.
And I didn't want to rebound. I didn't want to create the same situation. And so I think that was very wise of me to wait. And even now, being in the dating field, I think it's wise to do as much work as you can on healing. And that's Stefan, who I went to see, who we're hoping to get on the podcast. That's one thing he emphasizes is healing. Like, you need to heal.
Yeah.
Because otherwise you are going to create the same patterns. And
it is important. And that's really probably what my issue is too. And I mean, the Bible says seek first his kingdom and his righteousness and all these things we get them. I've just tried to live out those principles each day.
Yeah. You don't want to look for some guy to fix you or to make you feel better, to get you validation. You need to get your validation from God. And that's what I put on some of my profiles.
100.
Like, I'm not looking, you don't have to, I'm complete in Christ.
Yeah.
I'm not looking for somebody to complete me because I know I'm complete, but it should be a compliment to you. And so
icing on the cake.
Right. Exactly.
Yeah.
You've already done the work. You're healthy. You're fulfilled in Christ, and you bring that together, and it can be a beautiful thing if it's healthy.
Yeah. Absolutely agree. And, they're all fantastic. The narcissism one, most people's abusive spouse or partner is a narcissist. So we interviewed Chuck DeGroat, and he is amazing on that one. That's very educational. Anything on Chuck DeGroat?
Well, I mean, I loved him.
Besides, he came off sabbatical for 5 minutes to do our podcast and then went back on. He's amazing.
He's amazing. That was a great book to read, and it was a great interview to have with him.
Yes.
He covered so much, and it was very insightful. I like how he made you realize, I mean, I was convicted reading his book. Like, we all, like he said, we all can have a little narcissism in us. I mean, we can all be self-focused and self-serving, but there's a difference between that and just living that your whole life.
Right.
And he breaks
having
that down.
Narcissistic personality disorder.
Right. There's a big difference. But of course, we all have to humble ourselves before God.
Absolutely.
Every single one of us. There's nobody that can stand and say, oh, I've got it all together, because none of us does. We're all broken. But he also really got into that's very common, like kind of like Scott McKnight was saying in the pastoral position. Unfortunately, some of that not every pastor, we're not saying every pastor has that, but there are some pastors that may have that tendency. And of course, that's where you get into issues where abuse is being covered up.
Yeah. Because, a lot of narcissists want that platform. That's what Scott was saying.
Right.
Yeah. I never even thought about that.
Yeah, that was very insightful.
It's not everyone. I mean,
right. I'm not saying because I don't believe all pastors have that tendency.
I have a phenomenal pastor. So at Impact Church.
And it's a big church you go to. So that's great.
Absolutely. There's also the one on your brain and trauma, like how trauma affects the brain. It's very important to understand what's happening in the brain so you know how to heal. And she talks about how rest is so important for the brain. So you need to listen to that one too. That's great because your amygdala actually will shrink by resting. So there's in mindfulness, and there's all these ways to get out of amygdala hijack, which is the emotional part of your brain, which is what happens when you're in that trauma.
Yeah.
Jennifer Raftis.
Yeah.
So we've been talking about spiritual abuse, and we've been talking about all the types of abuses, but you need to heal physical, emotionally, and spiritually. So I feel like the podcast with number 16 was Celebrate Recovery with Cindy McGee and Tammy Moss is huge because Celebrate Recovery covers Hurts, Habits, and Hangups.
There you go. Yeah.
Hurts, Habits, and Hangups. So if you've been an abuse survivor, you can go to Celebrate Recovery. If you're struggling with depression or any type of addiction, Celebrate Recovery. It's a free program, but it helps with any type of issue that you have. And it's such a wonderful support, and it's so loving, and you become family with these people. And that also, along with that, number 90, My Story of Drug Addiction and Mental Illness with Leonard and Taylor. He tells his story, and some of the advice he gives is amazing. Like love from a distance if they're hurting you. If they're still addicted, that was really important. And also number 32, the state of the youth. They do talk about depression and the rates of suicide and all that going up. And that's a big reality check on what's going on in the world. And then number 13 with Casey Grant on diet, supplements, and exercise. And all those things are so important in healing. And people leave those out. But it all goes together with the physical, emotional, and spiritual healing. So if you leave out the diet, supplements, and exercise, what they do is it increases your serotonin and dopamine levels and the chemicals that boost your mood.
Yeah.
So you're going to spiral down if you don't do these physical things to help your body. And I do believe, back in Jesus' days, they were active. They automatically just did all these things. So we need to be active. We can't just be laying in bed or just having a pity party. We have to take action physically as well. And I think that's why those podcasts are so important and why we're stressing them today. And also with Don Hopkins, with the Christ-centered yoga, that all goes together. So all these 5 go together if you're trying to do some physical healing.
Right.
And like Karen and I have noticed lately, I've needed to do more stretching.
I know.
I've needed to do more
gotten
breathing.
Away from doing yoga. And I've been in a very stressful job. And I'm like, why am I not doing more yoga right now?
Yeah.
It is. It gets you out of fight or flight. They say, 3 deep breaths get you out of fight or flight.
Yeah.
So I don't know why I don't, sometimes I'm like, why am I my worst enemy? Sometimes I don't take the time to do the things that
and in Dawn's podcast, if you think that's not Christian, it's all Christ-centered. And we go through breathing exercises in there. Yeah. So if you want to listen to it and breathe through that, she gives an example of how to calm down. Helpful. So it is a great podcast.
It is.
Really, really is. And then we hope to be able to do a podcast soon on depression.
Right.
Yeah. We really hope to touch on everything.
Yeah, there's so many issues to cover.
Yeah.
Depression. I know I was just telling my oldest son yesterday about that because I feel like I've just struggled with depression a little bit my whole life. It's just something I'm prone to, I think. I feel like I always have like a little bit of a low grade depression, but there's times when it feels like it's more difficult than others. But yeah, depression is something that is important. I want to try to get some good guests to talk about that.
If you're being spiritually abused or abused by scripture or just with an abusive person at all, The Life-Saving Divorce with Gretchen Baskerville. That one is amazing. And it's a 300-page book, so it's a longer podcast, but it will, just being able to listen to that may be able to save you some time from reading the entire book. We go over almost every chapter. That was a long one, but I felt like that was really critical to cover everything because she covers safety planning and all that stuff as well. So we will be doing more podcasts on safety planning, but she does talk about that in her podcast. So I feel like that's a critical one too. Yeah. So that's it for me. Did you have any other ones that you want to talk about?
I just had a few. Just Patrick Weaver was another one I was re-listening to some of his. His was so inspiring. I loved a lot of the biblical examples he gave in his. Just a lot of gold nuggets in his.
I still read his posts if anyone needs to follow him. His so biblical, so scripturally based, anything you read on his.
Right. And
where's he at? Patrick Weaver Ministries, if you just Google him.
Yeah. Or he's on Facebook. I would highly recommend following him on Facebook. He posts, I think, every day and he covers a lot of subjects, but lately he's been talking more about dating and those have been really powerful what he says.
And he'll always back it up with scripture. When someone gives him a negative comment, he backs it up with more than one scripture. You're just like, wow.
Yeah.
He'll back it up with a lot of scripture.
I know.
Whoa.
He's very good at that.
Amazing. His knowledge of the Bible.
Some of the things he talked about on our podcast I thought was very inspiring.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
He was amazing. I was going to mention Christine Woolgar. Her article that she wrote on the Love and Respect book to me was really personal again because that was a book that I read over and over and over. I went to I don't know how many conferences on it. So I loved how she broke it down. So if you want to understand why Love and Respect can be a dangerous book, just listen to that podcast.
Yeah. And a lot of people disagree with that. And even some people we know, but you have to listen to understand.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. We're not saying everything he says in that book is bad, but it's just that to me, what it did is it enabled that.
Yeah.
It kind of reinforces their belief of like, I need respect. And, it doesn't focus anything on what the woman needs.
I think if you have a healthy, godly, biblical husband, that they're not going to take it to that extreme.
Right.
But I did not.
Right.
So.
Yeah,
that was the problem.
To me, it's a dangerous book.
Absolutely.
I wouldn't recommend that book, and I don't have that book anymore. No, it's not a book.
You threw that one across the room and then threw that in the garbage, right?
It's not a book on my bookshelf anymore. Yeah, Allison sharing her story because she's a friend of mine, and just hearing her story because I related to her. I went not to that extent, but I just thought it was very brave for her to share her story.
That hit home for me because I was
Yeah, I think anyone,
very much so.
I think anyone that had that homeschool experience or a cult experience, it was just very relatable. And I thought it was very brave of her to share what she shared.
And I tell a little bit more of my experience, which I don't talk about much.
Yeah.
And so that was a tough one for me, but hit home because people need to know that this is actually happening in the world.
Right.
There are cults and it happens.
Yeah, so you need to know.
Absolutely.
I thought his stood out to me because it was so amazing to hear this man who could admit that he had abusive tendencies and now he's really working on it. He's going to Celebrate Recovery regularly. He's being a leader in Celebrate Recovery. Yeah. He's being this model. And I thought, I hope men are able to listen to his podcast and say, wow, if he can do it, I can do it.
Yeah. What tears me up on that one is how he listened to our podcast because of Tammy and Cindy McGee Celebrate Recovery. He listened to it and listened to Mike Forrester's podcast, who was a former verbal abuser.
Yeah, and he reached out to
him.
And
he reached out to him and continued on his healing journey and started, just helping other people stop being abusers.
Yeah.
Like, that's incredible that our podcast helped.
It's very, very inspiring.
Wow. Like, that's just, what a story.
Yeah, his was very inspiring. It's so encouraging. And I hope that lots of men will listen to that one.
Yes.
And then Kathy Lorzell was a personal one to me because that book was very powerful to me, Redeeming Heartache.
It was a great podcast.
I'm a big fan of the Allender Center in general. And there's so many people that have written books that have come out of the Allender Center. I just love their whole approach of basically you just have to know your story. And understanding your story helps you understand why you do what you do and where you need healing and why you react the way you do and agreements you've made in the past that you may not realize you made, but it basically is hurting you now. So there's just so much in that. But that was really personal to me because that book really, I love that book. I love that it was just so full of hope because sometimes you can get bogged down looking at your past or looking at things that have happened to you. But there's such a hope-filled message in that. And that's why I love that book. So
I remember running and listening to Kathy Lorzell's and it was so deep. I had to rewind it and play it again and rewind it and play it again. Wait, did I get that? Did I?
Hers is deep. It's a deep book. She wrote it with Dan Allender. So it's not a very light. It's not a light and fluffy book.
I mean, I'm out of the brain fog, but it was deep.
Yeah.
Rewind. I got to listen to it again. Anyway,
I have to listen to those. Some of those. That's why I like about our podcast is you can listen to them as many times as you want.
Oh man,
I love going back and just listening to some of these ones I hadn't listened to in a long time. I'm like, these are still just as powerful as they were when we recorded them.
Yeah, absolutely.
So
absolutely.
Yeah, that's what I love about what we do and why we're going to continue it because there's more topics to cover. There's more great books out there to talk about. And we want to just keep offering as much encouragement and hope as we can.
Yeah. Is that your last one?
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, we've been working with emergency abuse victims and realizing how much the podcast is helping to the point where we're going to be creating some safety planning ones.
Yeah.
For anyone that is listening to us and is in an abusive relationship, how to safety plan to help abuse victims. And also one for the advocates and any family or friend that needs to help that person. So those are going to be coming up. And this is just so important. This is great to get all this out. And anybody that we didn't mention, it's not on purpose.
Right. We love
every
them all.
podcast was so powerful.
Very special to us.
Everyone. And we mentioned everybody's name in the 100th episode.
Yes.
So we did not forget about you. We're just trying to not make this 5 hours long.
Really?
It's really what it is. So we love all of you and every one of our guests.
We do. We're so thankful for all the guests we have and we're thankful for all of our listeners.
Yes.
We appreciate any and all support we get. So we just thank you so much. Even those that reach out to us. We've had some people lately reaching out to us.
Yeah.
And I love that.
Absolutely.
I would encourage anyone to do that because that encourages us because sometimes you don't know if people are listening. I mean, we know people are listening, but it's good to get little feedback every now and then too.
Yeah. Now that we've had the guests on that we knew listened to that, now we're getting feedback. Oh, I've listened to all of them too. So if you've listened to all of them, please message us, DM us on Instagram or Facebook.
It's an encouragement.
Yeah. And anytime we would love to talk to you. Yes. We'd love to engage with you and just let us know your story. We want to hear your story.
Yes, we do.
We are interested in your story and we really, really, really care.
We do.
And that's what's so hard about going through abuse is you care too much. It cares so much it hurts, but we do.
You just want to help as many areas as we can. So we want to, any topics that you'd like to hear, we'd definitely let us know.
Any feedback. Yeah.
Right. There's things that maybe we haven't been through, we can still address. So let us know. Give us that feedback.
And I already know I'm goofy and I've calmed that down a little bit. So you don't have to give me that comment at all. But anyway, I'm doing better. So, and I had the bloopers this podcast. Karen didn't have them.
I'm surprised.
Yeah. I only had one blooper on the name.
Yeah, usually I'm the one that messes that up.
Anyway, but I read 100 names, so I did mess up one. Okay, well, we're not going to talk about that. All right. Well, we love you guys, and I think we're out.
Yes.
We're
Thank
out.
you again. We appreciate our listeners so much.
All right. Bye.
Bye.
Talk about Lundy Bancroft. Lundy Bancroft. What did I just say? Oh, goodness.
Don't edit that. So make it sound right.
I did say it right at the last time.
Yeah, you did. Thanks for tuning in to Hanging On to Hope. Check out our website, hangingontohope.org. There are resources on there, and if you would like to donate or volunteer, you can do that through our website. We are a brand new nonprofit, so we appreciate any and all support. And we thank you for listening. And until next time, keep hanging on to hope. We are evidence that there is hope and healing for you, and our passion is to help you find it too. So thanks for tuning in.
Thanks for listening, everyone.